Hi, hello, good morning. As I mentioned in my previous video, we have yet another new makeup item to discuss today. New in the sense that I purchased it a few days ago. It is not new in the grand scheme of things. And what I'm talking about is another one of the Lancome Quints. This color story is called Nude Sculptural, number 18. And if you've been around my channel for about a year or so, you will know that last year I completely on a whim purchased one of the Lancome Quints, and the shade that I purchased last year is this one. This is Bronze Absolute, which is number maybe 17. Yeah, this is number 17. And I absolutely fell in love with the formula. I'm going to do a comparison swatch between the two palettes in a little bit so that you can see the differences in the color stories. What is special about these eyeshadow palettes though is something that is very difficult for me to translate on camera, because the thing is, they are very high quality, very beautiful, very flattering formula on the eye. In a swatch, or even when I apply them on my eye, you will be like, yes Mariam, these are pretty luxury high quality eyeshadows. So sometimes it really takes putting it on your eyelids to really know what I am talking about. They are a very different formula compared to a lot of other luxury formulas out there. For example, my beloved Guerlain are baked gelée, so they're nothing like this formula. I think what I find the most comparable to this formula is the Lisa Eldridge formula, which is not super surprising given that Lisa Eldridge is the creative director for Lancome Beauty. So the formulas, especially of the matte eyeshadows, do feel eerily similar to each other. They're not the same, but they're very similar. Another matte formula I think that sort of comes in the same vicinity, I feel like, is the one from Prada. When it comes to the metallic formula in these palettes, I don't think they're necessarily metallics. I would call them more like a satin formula, although from what I remember from swatching this palette in store, the shadow here in the middle is actually it has quite a good metallic sheen on it. I'm going to swatch this a little bit later for you, so for now let's just apply a little bit of face makeup, because I still need to, you know, apply the rest of my face, and I thought while we're at it I can also use my new Lancome bronzer and highlighter. For foundation I'm going to mix the Hourglass Buff and MAC Face and Body in the shade NC25. So I'm very curious, since last year, since I've been raving about these Lancome eyeshadow palettes, I think some of you in the meantime have tried the formula. I'm very curious from those of you who have tried it, what do you think about it? What do you think it's special like I do? What do you think is so special about it? I would really love to gather your opinions on that, because sometimes I really like something and I can sort of describe why I like it, but I can't always 100%, you know, get the message across. And you know, maybe one of you will be able to put better in words why this formula is so special, if you've tried it, of course, if you have come around to trying it, because I totally understand everyone wants to try the new and shiny, and these are not necessarily new and shiny. They've been around for a while. I want to say they released a collection recently that had a new color story, like this really warm reddish leaning color story, very pretty. I did actually see it in store. I don't recall if I swatched it. I think I just saw it. Now for concealer, let me grab the Lancome Teint Idol concealer. I'm going to have to mix it with a little bit of the NYX Serum Concealer. So the Teint Idol Ultra Wear Concealer in the shade 1, by the way, is a really nice concealer, especially if you're dealing with a little bit of texture underneath your eyes, because it dries down to a somewhat like demi-matte formula that looks a little bit blurring. Now for me this formula is just slightly too drying, and this shade is just slightly too deep. I don't really know how shade number 01 can be so incredibly deep, because even now with a bit of a tan I find it that it doesn't really brighten so much underneath my eyes. And because it is that demi-matte formula, it's not as creamy and as hydrating as, for example, the Dior Skin Correct. I do have to mix in something that is a little bit creamier in there, which is why I applied the NYX Serum Concealer. So I'm going to just take a tiny bit of the NYX Serum Concealer. The one that I have is in the shade Vanilla. And I usually go in with just a little bit of the NYX Concealer. to give this formula a tiny bit more of hydrating quality to it. But it is a lovely concealer. It is not the worst, most drying formula I've ever put underneath my eyes, and initially it actually looks quite perfecting and quite blurring. It's just that over the course of the day I noticed that my under eyes start to look really dry, so it's not an ideal formula for me, which is why it's not my favorite, but it is a good formula. And I think if you don't struggle with under eyes which are as finicky and as dry as mine, you might actually quite enjoy this formula because it's very lightweight, blurring, and I don't know, it has a really nice finish on the skin. I'm going to take the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Finish Powder because now I'm really dedicated to the cause of panning this powder. Look how little is left of it. I think it's really just a matter of weeks before this powder is gone, and then I will see whether I need to repurchase it on the short term, if I really miss it, or would I really like to try something else. And if we're being completely honest, I don't really need to buy any new powder because I have several powders that will probably take me years to finish. I have been very intrigued by the new Prada powder. I've developed a little bit of a soft spot for Prada's makeup line, and their new powder has this gorgeous green color. Obviously I don't think it's going to look actually green on the skin. It's marketed as being a transparent, like a translucent powder, and probably a little bit of that green tinge is going to serve as color correcting, so not the worst idea in the world. But I'm just very intrigued by this powder, and I like the packaging of Prada. I really like that you can buy refills, so once you buy the component, you don't actually have to repurchase the component itself, you can just rebuy the refills, and I like that kind of, you know, sustainability mindset in a luxury brand. Let me quickly do my brows with the Too Faced Laminating Brow Wax. For bronzer, let me grab this new release from the brand. These bronzers were released a couple of months ago. This is the shade Medium. I've talked about these bronzers a couple of times, and the only update I can give you is that to this day I actually really like both the bronzer and the highlighter. I'm going to put the highlighter on in a little bit. I think the bronzer shade is just such a beautiful shade, especially now that I've got a little bit of a tan going on after going on summer holidays. It just gives a little bit of warmth without looking really orange. I love how seamless, blurring, filtering, you know, the powder is on the skin. It's a very finely milled, very luxurious feeling powder, that is for sure. And the only thing I will mention about the whole range of these Lancome bronzers is that, especially the deeper shades, I think all of them have a somewhat red undertone to them, so that's something to consider depending on how deep you are and what your preferences are in bronzer. A red undertone in a bronzer may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I really enjoy a bit of a red in a bronzer. I think it just serves to give that natural sun-kissed, sunburnt effect. For blush today, I'm going to grab this one from Hermes because it's been a while since I've used this blush, and it's again such a beautiful high-end luxury formula. Again, very finely milled, actually quite comparable in terms of a powder to the one from Lancome. This is in the shade, what is this? This is in the shade Rose Tan, which is basically perfect for the kind of blush shade that I'm going for today. Something that has a somewhat rosier tone to it, but also a bit of a tan undertone to fit my skin. Very pretty shade, I really like it. And I like that I can use it when I'm very pale and also when I'm a little bit more tan. And finally, together with the new bronzers, Lancome also released a couple of new highlighters. This one is also in the shade Medium. I really like this highlighter. It looks like a generic, you know, sort of like a metallic-y finish highlighter if you just look at the pan, but if you feel the powder, it's so creamy. It almost feels like a cream that's been pressed into a little bit more of a powder form. I love how it looks on the skin. I love the shade of this highlighter, so I've actually really been enjoying both products. And of course, depending on your style and your preferred type of makeup, you may like one over the other. I personally really like both the bronzer and the highlighter. Now let me give you again a quick peek of the Nude Sculptural palette. So something to note about this palette is that there is only one metallic shade. All the rest in here are mattes, which usually wouldn't be my preference. I'm someone who prefers to, you know, have impactful metallics and shimmers, and if I buy a palette, I like there to be a bit of a balance between mattes and shimmers, perhaps more in favor of the shimmers than the mattes. But with this specific formula, I think the mattes are so exceptional that I'm not mad at all to have mostly matte eyeshadows in this palette. So if we quickly compare the two color stories next to each other, you will see that Nude Sculptural is precisely what it says. It seems like a good array of like neutrally to slightly rosy, especially this one here. Well, rosy as in like a slightly terracotta undertone to it, compared to Bronze Absolute, which has this gorgeous, like sort of like slightly taupe aspect to it. I'm going to swatch the two palettes side by side for you, but for starters, let's go ahead and swatch Nude Sculptural. So here you have the three lightest shades. And I'm actually just going to use the back of my hand here. Oh, can you see how smoothly these are applying? Just beautiful. And I find this metallic to actually have quite a bit of impact to it. And here we have the two deeper browns, which again, in my opinion, lean very neutral in tone. That's something I really like about this palette, and you know, something that I've been wishing for my favorite brands to do, like Pat McGrath Labs. I want a neutral color story. Look how pretty this color story is. Isn't that just gorgeous? Bronze Absolute is obviously a little bit deeper and a bit grungier of a color story, especially with that stunning olive there in the smack middle of the palette. But you can also see that I think overall it just leans a little bit cooler in tone. So here you have Nude Sculptural, on this side you have Bronze Absolute, and like I said, none of the eyeshadows in Bronze Absolute especially are very like impactful when it comes to the shimmers. They're really more of satins. That's why it struck me that this eyeshadow here in Nude Sculptural seems to have a bit more of a sheen to it. Still nothing glittery and overly metallic-y, it's just a bit more impactful. But here is again Nude Sculptural, Bronze Absolute. I love that the color stories are so different from each other, because I really wanted to have something that is just very different from Bronze Absolute. I'm probably going to focus on these four shades here, and I'm not going to use the terracotta pinkish nude, because I think for one it's just a little bit too light for me to use right now, and for two I just want to do something with the neutrals. So I'm first going to take this slightly lighter brown shade, and that's going to be the crease shade. And I don't know whether you can see how seamlessly this eyeshadow applied and how it basically already looks blended out. I really don't have to do anything more with the brush. I could keep going, but it's not necessary. That's really the beauty of these eyeshadows, and that is the thing that doesn't really... I can't really translate it very well via the camera. You have to try these eyeshadows, you have to put them on your eyelids to see how incredibly seamless and flattering they look on the skin, because that's also something that I appreciate about these eyeshadows. Aside from being absolutely impeccable in terms of how blendable they are, they also just look so incredibly like seamless and flattering on the skin. I think if you have mature skin, if you have skin that has a little bit more texture, these are going to be perfect for you. I'm now going to take a somewhat smaller blending brush, and I'm going to snug this mid-tone brown shade in the outer corner of the eye, or right here. And depending on, of course, how dramatic you want to go with your eye look, you don't even have to apply the really deep brown shade. I would like to see how that looks like if I smudge it here along my lashes, but you don't have to. You can definitely control the amount of drama in the looks that you create with this palette. You can also just use any of these eyeshadows all over your lid as your, you know, one and done moment. Again, so effortlessly blending out, just beautiful. I'm going to sort of mix now these two shades to apply on my lower lashes. And finally I'm going to take a little smudger brush. This is from the Sunset Cranes from Sonia G, and I'm going to take the deepest brown in this palette and run that here in the roots of my lashes for a little bit of extra definition and as a bit of a faux liner moment. There's also very little fallout because of how creamy this formula is. There's just a little bit of powder kick up, as you can see in the pan, but very, very minimal. And also because I'm a savage and I go quite heavy-handedly in the pans of these eyeshadows, I think if you're a bit more light-handed, you probably won't even have any powder kick up, because these essentially feel like creams. And since that metallic shade has quite a bit of a sheen to it, I'm actually going to apply a tiny bit of glitter glue. When it comes to the satin shades in Bronze Absolute, I don't really use glitter glue. At most, I will maybe wet my brush every now and then to get a bit more of an intense finish. But because these shades are more metallic than they really are, they're more satin than they really are metallic, glitter glue doesn't really make much of a difference. But with this one, because it feels quite... It seems like it has quite an intense amount of sheen to it, I would like to actually apply it over glitter glue, and I'm just going to use my fingers because, again, touching these eyeshadows is just such a satisfying experience. Oh, interesting. On the lid, this doesn't actually apply as impactful as it is on my finger. I think because of the creamy nature of this eyeshadow, a lot of it is actually staying behind on my finger. So what I'm going to try is actually apply this eyeshadow with a brush. Oh, okay, that's applying a little bit better on this side of on this eye, because here I applied it with my finger and I think I already had a layer of it and the glitter glue wasn't really doing anything anymore, and here I went straight with the brush and you can see that there's a bit more of a sheen here. I don't know whether you can see that. Again, a much more subtle sheen actually than I was expecting. Based on how this washed, especially in the store, I was really expecting a very intense metallic finish. Joke's on me, because why would I expect a high shine metallic finish from these when they're all very subtle? As inner corner highlight, I'm going to take this sort of DIY white palette of old Anastasia Beverly Hills highlighters, and I'm going to take a random one. Let's take this one because it has a bit of like that rosy glitter in there to apply as an inner corner highlight. So here is the eye look. If you don't want to apply any sort of like extra sparkle, you can stop here. Like I said, you can go much more minimalistic with what you do with this eyeshadow palette. Just pop one of these neutral shades on your lids, call it a day. Now I'm going to pop just the tiniest bit of extra sparkle to show you how I usually use these eyeshadow palettes. I'm going to take this here from Bobbi Brown. This is basically a dupe for Astral Solstice from Pat McGrath Labs, and I'm going to press just a few of these flecks here over top of the champagne shade, but really just a few to give. And of course, this outfit and this look basically begged for a red lipstick, and if you were paying attention, you would have noticed that I'm wearing my ribbon earrings from my friend Alice's Clay Designs. I'm going to try not to forget to link her web shop, her Etsy shop, in the description box below, because she makes the most beautiful clay earrings, as you can see. So of course I'm wearing a velvet ribbon from Lisa Eldridge. This beautiful neutral toned red. We're going for the neutrals, and obviously with this outfit, honestly, I bought this jumpsuit a few days ago and my first thought was, this is going to look so stunning with a red lipstick or like a bright pink lipstick. No other lipstick even stood a chance today. Anyway, do let me know what you thought about this look. I'm very curious what your thoughts are on these Lancome Quints. Like I said, if you have them, what do you think about them? What do you think is special about them? I think what is super special about them is not only that they're beautiful colors, but also the formula. I think these are impeccable, but I think even a swatch won't really do much for you. I unfortunately think you have to buy it, you have to put it on your eyelids in order to understand what I mean. But if you have them, please do share what you like about them or what you don't like about them. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up the rambling as usual. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!